The Drunk Mall Santa, 2008. Santa Claus is supposed to bring joy and magic to children during the Christmas shopping season at malls across America. Parents trust that the person in the red suit will be professional and create wonderful memories with their kids. But in December 2008, at a shopping mall in Connecticut, one mall Santa violated that trust in the worst possible way and ended up in handcuffs. The day started normally enough at the Danbury Fair Mall, where Santa had been greeting children and taking photos for several weeks. Parents would wait in long lines with excited kids who could not wait to tell Santa their Christmas wishes and sit on his lap for the traditional holiday photo. The Santa at this particular mall seemed friendly and engaged with the children during the morning shift. But something changed after the lunch break, when Santa returned to his throne for the afternoon session. Parents waiting in line began noticing that Santa seemed different than he had been in the morning. His speech was slurred, and he was having difficulty maintaining his balance while sitting in the ornate Christmas chair. Some parents thought maybe Santa was just tired from the long hours of greeting hundreds of children. Then the smell became undeniable as parents got closer to Santa's station. The overwhelming odor of alcohol was emanating from Santa Claus himself. Parents exchanged worried glances as they realized that Santa was clearly intoxicated, while children sat on his lap and told him their Christmas wishes. Some parents quietly removed their children from the line and left without saying anything to mall management. But one mother was not willing to stay silent about what she witnessed. She approached mall security and reported that Santa appeared to be drunk on duty while interacting with young children. Security officers immediately went to investigate the complaint and found that the concerned mother was absolutely correct. Santa was noticeably intoxicated and could barely form coherent sentences. Mall security removed Santa from his post and escorted him to a back office away from the holiday shoppers and families. They called the Danbury Police Department to handle the situation properly. When police officers arrived, they confirmed that Santa was indeed heavily intoxicated and determined he was too impaired to simply be sent home safely. The police arrested the mall Santa on charges of breach of peace and risk of injury to a minor. The arrest was particularly embarrassing because the officers had to handcuff Santa Claus still wearing the full red suit with white fur trim while shoppers watched in disbelief. Children who witnessed Santa being led away in handcuffs by police officers were confused and upset by what they were seeing. The local news media picked up the story immediately, and it became a regional scandal. Television stations showed footage of the mall Santa being escorted out by police while still in costume. The mall issued statements apologizing to families and explaining that the Santa in question had been immediately fired and would face criminal charges for his behavior. The arrested Santa, whose real name was not initially released to protect the mall's reputation, later admitted to drinking vodka during his lunch break. He claimed he thought a few drinks would help him get through the long afternoon of repetitive conversations with children. Instead, his poor judgment cost him his seasonal job and resulted in criminal charges that would follow him for years. The criminal case moved forward with the Santa facing potential jail time for endangering children while intoxicated. Parents who had allowed their children to sit with the drunk Santa expressed outrage that someone would be so irresponsible while working in a position of trust with young kids. The judge took the case seriously, given the circumstances involving children. The final outcome included probation, community service, mandatory alcohol counseling, and a permanent ban from working as a mall Santa anywhere in Connecticut. The mall implemented new policies requiring background checks and random alcohol testing for all seasonal Santa performers. Insurance companies raised rates for Santa photo operations, citing increased liability risks. The incident became a cautionary tale in the seasonal employment industry about the importance of proper screening and supervision for holiday character performers. Training programs for mall Santas now specifically address alcohol and substance policies with zero-tolerance enforcement. What should have been a magical Christmas job ended in arrest, criminal charges, and permanent damage to one man's reputation, all because he made the terrible decision to drink alcohol while wearing the Santa suit. Arrest number 2. The Chimney Santa Home Invasion. 2015. Santa Claus is famous for entering homes through chimneys on Christmas Eve to deliver presents to good children. But that magical tradition only works in stories and songs. In real life, climbing into someone's chimney without permission is called breaking and entering and it will get you arrested. In December 2015, a California man decided to surprise his family by dressing as Santa Claus and attempting to enter his own home through the chimney on Christmas Eve. The man, whose name was later revealed as Robert, had watched too many Christmas movies and thought it would be a hilarious and memorable surprise for his wife and children to see Santa actually coming down the chimney. Robert purchased a full Santa costume, complete with the red suit, black boots, white beard, and even a large sack for presents. On Christmas Eve, he waited until after dark when his family had gone to bed. He climbed onto the roof of his two-story home in San Bernardino, carrying his sack of presents, and prepared to make his grand entrance down the chimney. The chimney appeared wide enough at the top, and Robert was confident he could fit through and slide down into the fireplace below. He squeezed into the chimney opening and began his descent, expecting to drop smoothly into the living room where the Christmas tree waited. But chimneys are much narrower than they appear from the outside, and Robert quickly became stuck about halfway down. Robert tried to push himself farther down, but the chimney only got tighter and more narrow. He attempted to pull himself back up, but found he was wedged too tightly to move in either direction. The Santa suit fabric bunched up around him, making the tight space even more constricting. Robert realized with growing panic that he was completely stuck inside the chimney of his own home. He began yelling for help, hoping his wife would hear him and call for assistance. But his family was sound asleep, and the thick brick chimney muffled his cries. Robert spent over an hour stuck in the dark, narrow chimney, becoming increasingly desperate and starting to worry about his ability to breathe properly in the confined space. Meanwhile, a neighbor who had been arriving home late from a Christmas Eve party noticed movement and noise on Robert's roof. The neighbor assumed someone was attempting to break into the house and immediately called 911 to report a burglary in progress. The neighbor gave the address and explained that a suspicious person dressed in what looked like a Santa suit was on the roof, apparently trying to break in. Police officers arrived within minutes, responding to what they believed was a home invasion in progress. They surrounded the house with weapons drawn and called for the suspect to come out peacefully. The officers could hear muffled yelling coming from the chimney, but could not understand what the person was saying through the thick brick. The police woke up Robert's wife by pounding on the front door and informing her that there was an intruder stuck in her chimney. The confused woman explained that her husband Robert was missing from bed, and she had no idea where he had gone. The pieces started coming together as officers realized the person stuck in the chimney was probably the homeowner himself. The fire department was called to extract Robert from the chimney, which required specialized equipment and nearly 3 hours of careful work. Firefighters had to dismantle part of the chimney from the outside to create enough space to pull Robert out safely. When they finally freed him, he was covered in soot, scratched and bruised from the brick, and still wearing his now ruined Santa costume. Despite being the homeowner, Robert was arrested by police because the neighbor's call and the circumstances required a full investigation. Officers questioned whether Robert had been drinking or was under the influence of drugs, given the bizarre nature of the incident. Robert repeatedly explained he was just trying to surprise his family, but officers felt the situation warranted at minimum a mental health evaluation. Robert was charged with creating a public disturbance and reckless endangerment of himself. The charges were eventually dropped after Robert's wife confirmed his story, and character witnesses vouched that this was an isolated incident of extremely poor judgment. But Robert had to pay over $8,000 to repair the chimney that firefighters had dismantled to rescue him. The story made national news, with headlines about the Santa who got arrested trying to break into his own house. Late-night television comedians made jokes about the incident for weeks. Robert's family never let him forget the disastrous Christmas Eve when Dad got stuck in the chimney and arrested while wearing a Santa suit. The expensive chimney repair and public humiliation taught Robert that some Christmas traditions should remain strictly fictional, and that Santa's chimney magic does not work for regular humans in the real world. Arrest number 3. Santa Sleigh Traffic Violations, 2012. Christmas parades feature elaborate floats and decorations, including Santa riding in his sleigh, waving to crowds of excited children. But when Santa tries to drive his sleigh on public roads outside of organized parades, he quickly discovers that reindeer are not the only way to get a traffic ticket. In December 2012, a Minnesota man named Jeffrey decided to spread Christmas cheer throughout his neighborhood by converting his pickup truck into Santa's sleigh. He spent weeks building an elaborate decoration that completely transformed the truck into a festive holiday display. The sleigh included full sides made of plywood painted red and gold, fake reindeer figures attached to the front, wrapped present props in the truck bed, and thousands of twinkling Christmas lights powered by a generator. Jeffrey dressed in a full Santa costume and began driving his sleigh truck through residential neighborhoods in St. Paul, playing Christmas carols through loudspeakers mounted on the vehicle. Children would run to their windows to see Santa driving by, and families came out of their houses to wave and take photos. Jeffrey felt like he was bringing the magic of Christmas directly to people's homes. But the elaborate sleigh decoration created serious safety problems that Jeffrey had not considered. The plywood sides blocked his rearview mirrors completely, making it impossible to see vehicles behind him or check blind spots. The reindeer figures extending from the front of the truck added over 3 feet to the vehicle's width, making it too wide for a single lane. The Christmas lights were so bright that drivers reported being temporarily blinded when the sleigh passed them at night. The St. Paul Police Department began receiving calls from concerned citizens reporting a dangerous vehicle driving through neighborhoods. Drivers complained that the sleigh truck was a road hazard and nearly caused multiple accidents. Parents worried that children were running into the street to see Santa without looking for other cars. The police decided they needed to stop the sleigh before someone got hurt. Officers spotted Jeffrey's sleigh truck on Summit Avenue and initiated a traffic stop. Jeffrey pulled over confused about why police would stop Santa Claus, who was just trying to spread Christmas joy. The officers approached the vehicle and immediately documented numerous violations of Minnesota traffic laws and vehicle codes. The decorations exceeded legal vehicle width limits by over 2 feet on each side. The blocked mirrors violated laws requiring functional rear-view visibility. The generator in the truck bed was not properly secured and posed a fire hazard. The Christmas lights were brighter than legal headlight limits and constituted a blinding hazard to other drivers. The loudspeakers exceeded noise ordinance levels for residential areas. Jeffrey tried to explain that he was just being Santa and bringing happiness to children during Christmas. The officers understood his good intentions, but explained that safety laws exist for important reasons and apply to everyone, including Santa Claus. They could not allow such a dangerous vehicle to continue operating on public roads, where it risked causing accidents. The officers wrote Jeffrey citations for over a dozen traffic violations, including improper vehicle width, obstructed visibility, excessive noise, and operating an unsafe vehicle. The total fines exceeded $1,500. But more seriously, the officers informed Jeffrey that he would be arrested if he attempted to drive the sleigh truck on public roads again before removing the illegal decorations. Jeffrey became argumentative, insisting that Christmas decorations should be exempt from normal traffic laws. The officers remained professional but firm, explaining that good intentions do not override safety regulations. When Jeffrey refused to accept the citations and continued arguing, the officers made the decision to arrest him for obstruction and failure to comply with lawful orders. Jeffrey was handcuffed, still wearing his Santa suit, and placed in the back of the police car. The sleigh truck was impounded and towed to the police lot. The sight of Santa Claus being arrested and his sleigh being towed away was witnessed by dozens of neighborhood children and families who had come outside to see what was happening. Local television news crews arrived and filmed the aftermath, showing the empty street where Santa's sleigh had been towed from. The story went viral with debates about whether police were being too strict or whether Jeffrey was being irresponsible. Some people defended Jeffrey as a man trying to spread Christmas spirit, while others agreed the vehicle was genuinely dangerous. Jeffrey spent several hours in jail before being released on bail. He eventually pleaded guilty to the traffic violations and paid all fines. The sleigh truck was returned after Jeffrey removed all the decorations that violated safety codes. He was prohibited from rebuilding the sleigh and warned that future violations would result in more serious charges. The Christmas sleigh arrest taught Jeffrey and others that holiday enthusiasm must be balanced with public safety and legal compliance. Cities around the country used the incident to clarify rules about vehicle decorations during holidays. Jeffrey's expensive mistake reminded everyone that even Santa has to follow traffic laws when driving on real roads, with real consequences for breaking them. Arrest number 4. The Santa Bar Brawl, 2013. Office, Christmas parties, and holiday celebrations often involve alcohol, and occasionally things get out of control. But nobody expects to see multiple Santa Clauses fighting each other in a drunken brawl that requires police intervention. In December 2013, a bar in New York City called Santa Con hosted its annual Santa Pub Crawl event, where thousands of people dress in Santa costumes and bar hop throughout Manhattan. The event had grown from a small gathering to a massive party with over 10,000 participants, all wearing red Santa suits flooding the streets and bars of New York. The festive atmosphere started friendly, with Santas singing Christmas carols and taking group photos. But as the day progressed and alcohol consumption increased, the mood shifted from jolly to rowdy. By late afternoon, many of the Santas were extremely intoxicated, and the crowds became increasingly unruly and aggressive. At one popular bar in the East Village, a dispute broke out between two groups of Santas over space at the crowded bar. The establishment was packed beyond capacity with wall-to-wall Santa costumes, making it difficult to move or order drinks. Tensions had been building as drunk Santas pushed and shoved, trying to get bartenders' attention. One Santa accidentally spilled a drink on another Santa's costume. The Santa whose suit got splashed demanded an apology and payment for dry cleaning. The Santa who spilled the drink laughed and made a joke about how all the suits looked identical anyway. The insulted Santa did not appreciate the dismissive response and shoved the other Santa backward. The shove turned into pushing, which escalated into punches being thrown between the two Santas. Other Santas nearby chose sides and joined the fight, creating a massive brawl involving over a dozen people, all dressed identically in Santa costumes. The surreal scene of multiple Santa Clauses punching and wrestling each other shocked the other bar patrons. Bar security attempted to break up the fight, but were overwhelmed by the number of combatants and the difficulty of identifying who started the violence when everyone looked exactly the same. Bottles were broken, furniture was damaged, and several people sustained injuries, including black eyes, bloody noses, and bruised ribs. The bar manager called the police, reporting a large fight in progress involving numerous participants. Multiple police units responded to find absolute chaos with Santa Clauses fighting both inside and outside the bar. Officers waded into the melee, pulling apart fighting Santas and attempting to restore order. Witnesses gave conflicting accounts of who threw the first punch and who was acting in self-defense versus who was being aggressive. The identical costumes made it nearly impossible for officers to determine which Santas were involved in the original altercation versus which ones joined in later. Police decided the safest approach was to arrest everyone who appeared to have participated in the violence. Over 20 Santa Clauses were arrested and handcuffed outside the bar. The bizarre image of that many Santas in handcuffs lined up on the sidewalk attracted crowds of onlookers who took photos and videos that quickly went viral on social media. News helicopters circled overhead, filming the mass Santa arrest for the evening news. The arrested Santas were transported to the local precinct, still wearing their costumes. The booking process was complicated by the fact that many of the Santas refused to give their real names, insisting they were Santa Claus. Officers had to carefully check identification and process each person individually while dealing with intoxicated suspects who thought the situation was hilarious. Charges included disorderly conduct, assault, criminal mischief for the property damage, and public intoxication. Several of the Santas spent the night in jail still wearing their red suits. The bar filed a lawsuit seeking damages for the destroyed furniture and lost business from having to close early. The SantaCon organization issued statements condemning the violence and reminding participants that the event was meant to be fun and family-friendly, not an excuse for drunk fighting. The bar banned all future SantaCon events from their establishment. The city considered implementing new regulations for large costume gatherings. Most of the arrested Santas eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges and paid fines plus restitution to the bar. Some lost their jobs when employers saw their mugshots in Santa costumes circulating online. The Santa Bar Brawl became an infamous example of how holiday parties can spiral out of control when alcohol and mob mentality override common sense and basic decency. Arrest number 5. Santa trespassing at closed mall, 2010. Shopping malls close their doors at night, and trespassing on private property after hours is illegal, even if your intentions seem harmless and festive. One aspiring Santa learned this lesson the hard way when he broke into a closed mall to set up an unauthorized Christmas display. In December 2010, a man named Marcus, who worked as a professional Santa impersonator during the holiday season, became frustrated that the local mall in Phoenix, Arizona, had not hired him for their Santa photo operation. Marcus believed he was the best Santa in the area and felt the mall had made a mistake by choosing someone else for the lucrative position. Marcus decided to prove his worth by creating an elaborate surprise Christmas display in the mall that would demonstrate his dedication and creativity. He planned to break into the mall after closing time, set up a beautiful Santa workshop scene in the main atrium, and be there in the morning when mall management arrived to show them what they were missing by not hiring him. Marcus gathered props including a decorated throne, wrapped presents, toy displays, Christmas lights, and artificial snow. He waited until well after midnight when he was certain the mall was completely closed and security was minimal. He approached a service entrance that he had noticed was sometimes left unlocked by cleaning crews. The door was indeed unlocked, and Marcus was able to enter the dark, closed mall carrying his boxes of Christmas decorations. He made multiple trips back to his van, bringing in all the props and supplies he needed for his elaborate, unauthorized Santa display. Marcus spent over 3 hours setting up the display in the center court atrium. The scene Marcus created was admittedly impressive with professional quality decorations and careful attention to detail. He set up his Santa throne surrounded by wrapped presents, placed toy soldier figures standing guard, strung Christmas lights throughout the area, and even created a fake snow effect using white fabric and cotton batting. When finished, Marcus sat in his throne wearing his Santa costume and waited for morning. What Marcus did not realize was that the mall had security cameras monitoring all areas, including the main atrium. The overnight security guard watching the camera feeds was shocked to see someone moving around in the closed mall. The guard immediately called the Phoenix Police Department, reporting a break-in and possible theft in progress. Police officers arrived and entered the mall with weapons drawn, expecting to find burglars stealing merchandise. Instead, they found Marcus sitting calmly in his Santa throne, surrounded by Christmas decorations. Marcus cheerfully greeted the officers and explained that he was just setting up a display to show the mall what a great Santa he would be. The officers were baffled by the situation, but explained to Marcus that regardless of his intentions, he had committed criminal trespassing by entering the closed mall without permission. Marcus argued that he had not stolen anything and was actually improving the mall with free decorations. The officers informed him that trespassing is illegal, whether you steal something or not. Marcus was arrested and handcuffed, still wearing his full Santa costume. The officers had to carefully navigate him through the mall in handcuffs while he was wearing the bulky red suit and black boots. The absurdity of arresting Santa Claus for breaking in to decorate a mall was not lost on the responding officers. Mall security arrived and documented everything Marcus had brought into the building. Mall management was contacted at home and came to the mall in the middle of the night to assess the situation. They were actually impressed by the quality of Marcus's display, but emphasized that breaking into the mall was completely unacceptable and potentially dangerous. Marcus was charged with criminal trespassing and breaking and entering. The mall pressed charges despite Marcus's claims that he meant no harm. The district attorney proceeded with prosecution, arguing that allowing this behavior would set a dangerous precedent, encouraging others to break into businesses with various excuses. The case went to trial, where Marcus represented himself and tried to argue that his Christmas spirit and good intentions should excuse the technical violation of trespassing laws. The judge was not persuaded and found Marcus guilty on both charges. The sentence included probation, community service, a permanent ban from the mall property, and a restraining order preventing him from contacting mall management. Marcus's criminal record from the incident made it difficult for him to find work as a professional Santa in subsequent years. Background checks revealed his trespassing conviction, and most malls were unwilling to hire someone with a criminal history of breaking into shopping centers, even if the circumstances were unusual. The Phoenix Mall incident became a case study in security training about how trespassers are not always traditional criminals, and how unusual situations still require appropriate legal responses. Marcus's misguided attempt to prove himself as a great Santa ended his career in the very industry he loved. The expensive lesson taught Marcus that enthusiasm and creativity cannot override property laws, and that breaking and entering is a crime, no matter how festive your decorations might be. Arrest number 6. Santa stealing donation, kettle money, 2009. The Salvation Army uses volunteers dressed as Santa to collect charitable donations in red kettles outside stores during the Christmas season. The money collected helps families in need and supports important community programs. But in 2009, one fake Santa betrayed the trust of generous donors by stealing from the very kettle he was supposed to be protecting. In November 2009, the Salvation Army set up their traditional red kettle donation stations outside major retailers in Chicago, Illinois. Volunteers dressed as Santa would stand beside the kettles, ringing bells and greeting shoppers while encouraging donations. The organization carefully screens volunteers and tracks all money collected to ensure donations reach people who need help. One man named Dennis approached the Salvation Army and volunteered to work as a kettle Santa. He filled out the application, passed the basic background check that showed no major criminal history, and attended the brief orientation session. Dennis was assigned to a high-traffic location outside a busy grocery store where donation kettles typically collected hundreds of dollars per day. Dennis worked his first few shifts normally and turned in the collected donations at the end of each day as required. Salvation Army coordinators noted that his kettle collections seemed lower than expected, given the store location and foot traffic, but assumed it was just natural variation in donor generosity. But other volunteers working nearby locations began reporting suspicious behavior. They noticed that Dennis would frequently turn his back to shoppers and appear to be doing something with the kettle itself. When other Santas approached to say hello, Dennis would act nervous and defensive. The reports raised concerns among Salvation Army supervisors. The organization decided to conduct surveillance on Dennis during his next shift. A supervisor positioned herself nearby, pretending to shop while actually watching Dennis closely. What she observed confirmed the worst suspicions. Dennis was systematically stealing money from the donation kettle throughout his shift. Dennis had developed a method where he would ring his bell enthusiastically when shoppers were dropping money into the kettle. But during slow periods, when no one was immediately nearby, he would reach into the kettle and pull out bills, stuffing them into his pockets under the Santa coat. He was careful and quick, trying to avoid being noticed by passing shoppers or store employees. The Salvation Army supervisor immediately contacted the Chicago Police Department and reported theft in progress. Officers arrived and observed Dennis themselves to confirm the criminal activity before making an arrest. They watched him steal from the kettle 3 separate times in a 15-minute period. Police officers approached Dennis while he was standing beside his kettle, still dressed in the full Santa costume. They identified themselves and informed Dennis that he was under arrest for theft. Dennis initially denied any wrongdoing and claimed there must be some misunderstanding. Officers searched Dennis and found over $300 in cash stuffed in his pockets and hidden in his Santa coat. The money included bills that had been marked by Salvation Army supervisors earlier as bait to prove if theft was occurring. The marked bills provided definitive evidence that Dennis had been stealing from the donation kettle. Dennis was handcuffed and arrested, still wearing the Santa suit. The image of Santa being arrested outside the grocery store shocked and saddened shoppers who witnessed the scene. Many people who had donated earlier in the day felt betrayed, learning that their charitable contributions had been stolen by the very person supposed to be collecting for charity. The Salvation Army conducted a full investigation and estimated that Dennis had stolen approximately $2,000 over the course of his volunteer work. The organization was mortified that someone had exploited their charity operation and stolen money intended for families in need during the holidays. Dennis was charged with theft and fraud. During police questioning, he admitted he had volunteered specifically to steal donation money. He had been unemployed and facing eviction and saw the kettle operation as an opportunity to make quick cash. Dennis showed no remorse and only regretted getting caught. The criminal case proceeded quickly, given the clear evidence, including the marked bills and witness testimony. Dennis pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 6 months in jail plus restitution of the full estimated amount stolen. He was also ordered to perform community service for a different charity under strict supervision. The Salvation Army implemented new security measures, including more frequent collection of kettle money, increased supervisor monitoring, enhanced background checks for volunteers, and installation of security cameras at high-value kettle locations. They also launched a public relations campaign to assure donors that incidents like Dennis's theft were extremely rare. The arrest of the thieving Santa made national news and damaged public trust in charitable giving programs. Some people became more cautious about donating and questioned whether their money would actually reach people in need. The Salvation Army worked hard to rebuild confidence and emphasized that the vast majority of their volunteers are honest people genuinely trying to help others. Dennis's theft conviction made him ineligible for most employment and volunteer opportunities. The short-term gain of stealing a few $1,000s resulted in long-term consequences, including jail time, a criminal record, and the knowledge that he had stolen from hungry families during Christmas. The arrest proved that even fake Santas face real justice when they betray the trust of their community and steal from those who can least afford it. Arrest number 7. Santa assaulting photographer, 2011. Mall. Santa photo operations depend on cooperation between Santa performers, photographers, and parents to create magical Christmas memories for children. But when personalities clash and stress levels rise, even Santa can lose his temper with violent consequences. In December 2011, at a mall in New Jersey, the Santa photo booth was experiencing an extremely busy day, with long lines of families waiting hours for their turn with Santa. The photographer working with Santa that day was a seasonal employee named Jennifer, who took pride in capturing perfect Christmas photos. Jennifer had specific requirements for good photos, including proper lighting, clean backgrounds, and children positioned correctly on Santa's lap. She would sometimes ask families to wait while she adjusted equipment or repositioned children to get the perfect shot. Some parents appreciated her attention to detail, while others became impatient with the delays. The Santa performer, whose name was Thomas, had worked as a mall Santa for over 10 years and usually enjoyed the work despite the long hours and repetitive conversations. But Thomas and Jennifer had been having increasing conflicts throughout the season about the pace of photo sessions. Thomas felt Jennifer took too long perfecting each shot while families waited. Jennifer felt Thomas rushed through interactions without giving her time for quality photos. On this particularly busy Saturday afternoon, tensions reached a breaking point. A family with 3 young children approached Santa's area, and the kids were excited, but also tired and cranky from waiting in line. Jennifer attempted to position all 3 children on and around Santa's lap while getting them to smile at the camera simultaneously. The children were not cooperating and kept moving or making faces. Jennifer asked the family to try again multiple times. Thomas was getting frustrated because the prolonged session was backing up the already long line even more. He made a comment under his breath about Jennifer being too picky and needing to just take the photo. Jennifer heard the comment and snapped back that if Thomas would help control the children, better she could get better photos faster. Thomas responded that maybe if Jennifer knew how to do her job efficiently, they would not have these problems. The argument escalated with both raising their voices while the confused family and their children watched. Jennifer told Thomas that she was tired of his attitude and lack of professionalism. Thomas stood up from his throne, causing the children to scramble off his lap. He pointed his finger at Jennifer and told her she was the most difficult photographer he had ever worked with, and she was ruining Christmas for families with her perfectionist demands. Jennifer stepped closer and told Thomas that he was a terrible Santa, who did not care about giving families quality photos they would treasure forever. Thomas lost his temper completely and shoved Jennifer backward. She stumbled but caught herself before falling. The physical contact crossed a line from verbal argument to assault. Mall security was immediately called by witnesses who saw Santa push the photographer. Parents grabbed their children and moved away from the area. Jennifer yelled that she was calling the police, and Thomas had just assaulted her in front of dozens of witnesses, including children. Thomas realized what he had done and tried to apologize, saying he just lost his temper and did not mean to put his hands on her. Jennifer refused to accept the apology and insisted that police be called to file assault charges. Mall security arrived and separated the two while taking statements from witnesses. The Paramus Police Department responded and interviewed both parties, plus several witnesses who had seen the entire altercation. Multiple people confirmed that Thomas had physically shoved Jennifer during the heated argument. The officers determined that Thomas had committed assault regardless of how frustrated he might have been. Thomas was arrested and charged with simple assault. The arrest of Santa Claus in full costume in the middle of the mall photo area traumatized the children who witnessed it. Parents tried to explain to confused kids why police were handcuffing Santa, but there was no good way to make sense of the situation. The mall immediately terminated both Thomas and Jennifer from their positions. The Santa photo booth was shut down for the rest of the day, causing disappointment for families who had waited in line. The mall scrambled to find replacement Santa and photographer employees for the remaining weeks of the Christmas season. Jennifer pursued the criminal charges and testified at Thomas's trial. Thomas pleaded guilty to assault and received probation plus anger management counseling. He was banned from working as a mall Santa at any location owned by the mall company. Jennifer also left the seasonal photography business, finding the incident too traumatic to continue in that line of work. The assault incident led to new policies requiring conflict resolution training for all seasonal photo booth employees. Malls implemented procedures for staff to take breaks when stress levels got too high, and supervisors to mediate disputes before they escalated to violence. Thomas's assault conviction and the publicity from the Santa arrest destroyed his decade-long career as a professional Santa performer. Background checks would forever show the assault charge, making it nearly impossible to get hired for work involving children. One moment of lost temper cost Thomas his seasonal income, his reputation, and his beloved role bringing Christmas joy to families. The mall Santa assault proved that even people in positions associated with kindness and joy are still human and capable of violence when pushed too far. The lesson was expensive for Thomas, but served as a warning to others about maintaining professionalism even in stressful holiday season jobs where children are watching and judging every action. Arrest number 8. Santa shoplifting in costume, 2014. Wearing a Santa costume is supposed to make you more visible and memorable, which is exactly why using that costume while shoplifting is one of the worst criminal ideas possible. But in 2014, one man thought the red suit would somehow help him steal merchandise from stores without getting caught. In December 2014, a Seattle area man named Gregory put on a full Santa Claus costume, including the red suit, white beard, black belt, and shiny black boots. But instead of going to work at a mall or volunteer for charity, Gregory went shopping at a large electronics retailer with criminal intentions. Gregory entered the Best Buy store and browsed the aisles, looking at expensive items. Store employees and other shoppers smiled at the Santa costume, assuming Gregory was either working somewhere nearby or just spreading holiday cheer. The costume made Gregory highly visible and memorable to everyone in the store. Gregory selected several high-value items, including tablet computers, video game consoles, and expensive headphones. He carried the items around the store as if shopping normally. But Gregory had no intention of paying for anything he was selecting. He was planning to simply walk out with the merchandise hidden under his Santa coat. Gregory attempted to conceal the stolen items by stuffing tablets and headphones under his red Santa coat and down his pants. The bulky costume made it difficult to hide the rectangular shapes of the electronics. The suspicious bulges were obvious to store loss prevention officers who had been watching Gregory on security cameras. Loss prevention personnel observed Gregory select merchandise, attempt to conceal it under his clothing, and then walk toward the exit doors without making any attempt to pay. They radioed ahead to security guards stationed at the entrance to intercept the shoplifting Santa before he could leave the store. As Gregory approached the doors, trying to act casual despite having thousands of dollars in stolen electronics hidden on his person, security guards stepped in front of him and asked him to stop. Gregory tried to push past them, claiming he was in a hurry to get to his next Santa appearance. The guards were not fooled and informed Gregory they knew he had unpaid merchandise. Gregory insisted there must be some mistake and that Santa would never steal anything. The security guards asked Gregory to remove his Santa coat and empty his pockets. Gregory refused and tried to leave, but the guards physically prevented him from exiting. The confrontation attracted attention from other shoppers who gathered to watch Santa arguing with security. The Seattle Police Department was called to respond to a shoplifting incident in progress involving a suspect dressed as Santa Claus. Officers arrived and took control of the situation. They asked Gregory to comply with the search and warned him that resisting would only add more charges to his current predicament. Gregory finally gave up the charade and admitted he had taken merchandise without paying. He removed his Santa coat, revealing multiple stolen items stuffed in his waistband and pockets. Security guards recovered tablets, gaming controllers, headphones, and other electronics worth approximately $3,000 total. The police arrested Gregory for felony shoplifting, given the high value of stolen merchandise. The arrest of Santa Claus for theft inside a Best Buy was captured on cell phone cameras by numerous shoppers. The videos and photos quickly spread on social media, with people mocking the absurdity of Santa getting arrested for stealing Christmas presents. Gregory was searched more thoroughly at the police station, where officers found he was also wearing stolen merchandise, including a watch and Bluetooth speaker. The additional thefts increased the total value and made the charges more serious. Gregory had an extensive criminal history, including multiple prior shoplifting convictions. The criminal case against Gregory was straightforward, given the video evidence and recovered stolen property. His public defender had no viable defense strategy. Gregory pleaded guilty to felony theft and was sentenced to 1 year in jail plus restitution to Best Buy for the attempted theft. The Best Buy shoplifting Santa became a viral news story and a cautionary tale about the stupidity of committing crimes while wearing highly memorable costumes. Security experts used the case in training to illustrate that criminals often make irrational decisions that make them easier to catch. Gregory's decision to wear a Santa costume while shoplifting was analyzed by psychologists as an example of magical thinking, where the criminal believed the costume would somehow protect him or make store security less suspicious. Instead, the costume made him the most memorable person in the entire store and guaranteed that every witness would remember seeing Santa stuffing electronics into his pants. The incident damaged the Santa Claus image in the local community, with parents having to explain to confused children why they saw Santa being arrested for stealing. Best Buy increased their security presence during the holiday season following the incident. Gregory's jail sentence meant he spent Christmas behind bars wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of the red Santa suit that had gotten him arrested and become a symbol of his criminal foolishness. Arrest number 9. Santa at political protest. 2016. Santa Claus is generally viewed as a non-political figure who represents generosity and goodwill to everyone, regardless of their beliefs or affiliations. But in 2016, one activist Santa brought political controversy to the North Pole by using the costume during a protest that resulted in his arrest. In December 2016, during a contentious political season, a man named Richard decided to wear a Santa costume to a protest rally in Washington, D.C. The protest focused on environmental issues, and Richard felt that Santa, as a symbol of the North Pole, would be an effective character to highlight concerns about climate change affecting polar regions. Richard's Santa costume included signs attached to the suit reading, "Save the North Pole," and "Melting ice caps are not nice." He joined hundreds of other protesters marching near government buildings and chanting slogans demanding action on environmental policies. Most of the other protesters were dressed normally, but Richard's Santa costume drew significant media attention and photo opportunities. The peaceful protest had obtained proper permits and was proceeding legally through designated areas. Police were present to manage traffic and ensure public safety, but were not interfering with the protesters' rights to demonstrate. Richard was enjoying the attention his Santa costume brought to the environmental message. However, the protest route was scheduled to end at a specific time and disperse from the area to allow normal traffic to resume. When the permitted time expired, police began directing protesters to leave the area and return to the sidewalks. Most protesters complied and started departing peacefully. But Richard and a small group of activists refused to leave, arguing that their message was too important to be limited by arbitrary time restrictions. They sat down in the middle of the street, blocking traffic, and chanting that they would not move until their demands were heard by government officials. Police issued multiple warnings that the protesters were now in violation of the law by blocking traffic without a permit, and that they would be arrested if they did not voluntarily leave. Richard, in his Santa costume, remained sitting in the street, insisting that Santa had a duty to protect the North Pole from climate change. The police gave several final warnings and opportunities for the protesters to leave peacefully. When Richard and about 20 others refused to comply, the officers began making arrests for unlawful assembly and obstruction of traffic. Richard was handcuffed while still wearing his full Santa costume and escorted to a police transport van. The arrest of Santa Claus at a climate change protest created powerful images that spread rapidly through news media and social media. Supporters of the protest praised Richard's commitment and called the arrest an example of government suppressing environmental activism. Critics argued that breaking the law damages legitimate protest movements and that using Santa for political purposes was inappropriate. Richard was processed at the local precinct and charged with failure to obey police orders and obstructing traffic. He was held for several hours before being released on his own recognizance, with a court date scheduled. Richard gave interviews to media outlets explaining that being arrested was worth it to draw attention to the critical issue of climate change. The court proceedings focused on whether Richard's civil disobedience was justified and whether using Santa Claus in political protest was protected speech. Richard's lawyer argued that the arrest violated his First Amendment rights to peaceful protest and symbolic expression. The prosecution argued that while protest is protected, blocking traffic is not, and that permits exist for good reasons. Richard was ultimately convicted of the obstruction charge and fined $500 plus court costs. He considered it a small price for the media attention the protest received. But the conviction created a criminal record that affected his employment and professional reputation. The Santa protest arrest sparked debates about the appropriate boundaries of political activism and whether using culturally beloved symbols like Santa Claus for controversial causes is effective or counterproductive. Some parents objected to Santa being politicized and associated with civil disobedience that resulted in arrest. Environmental groups had mixed reactions, with some praising Richard's creativity and dedication, while others worried that the stunt trivialized serious issues by turning them into photo opportunities. The arrest did generate significant news coverage, but whether it changed any minds or policies remained unclear. Richard continued environmental activism in subsequent years, but chose not to wear the Santa costume again after receiving feedback that mixing Santa with politics made some people uncomfortable and distracted from the actual issues. The lesson learned was that while attention-getting tactics can raise awareness, they can also backfire if they alienate the very people activists are trying to persuade. The Santa climate protest arrest entered the archives of unusual political demonstrations and became a case study in activism strategy courses about the risks and rewards of creative civil disobedience during the highly symbolic Christmas season. Arrest number 10. Santa parking violations, 2017. Parking enforcement officers are known for being strict about following parking regulations regardless of who you are or what you claim to be doing. In 2017, one Santa discovered that bringing Christmas joy does not exempt you from parking tickets or arrest when you refuse to cooperate with authorities. In December 2017, a man named Paul worked as an independent Santa performer in Los Angeles, visiting hospitals and nursing homes to bring Christmas cheer to patients who could not leave to see Santa at malls. Paul drove a large van decorated to look like Santa's sleigh, complete with wrapped present props on the roof and reindeer antlers attached to the front. Paul's charitable Santa visits were genuine and appreciated by the facilities he visited. But his methods of parking while making these visits repeatedly violated Los Angeles parking regulations. Paul would park his large sleigh van in loading zones, fire lanes, and handicapped spaces because they were closest to building entrances and made it easier to unload his props and equipment. Paul's reasoning was that he was only parking briefly while visiting patients and that his charitable work should take priority over strict enforcement of parking rules. He accumulated over 30 parking tickets during the Christmas season, but ignored them all, believing the city would understand and dismiss them given the good nature of his work. Los Angeles parking enforcement officers did not share Paul's view that Santa deserved special parking privileges. They continued writing tickets every time they found the sleigh van parked illegally. Multiple warnings were placed on the vehicle, explaining that the violations were serious and that failure to pay fines would result in additional penalties. Paul continued ignoring the tickets and warnings. His unpaid parking fines accumulated to over $4,000. The City Parking Violations Bureau sent certified letters to Paul's address explaining that his vehicle would be immobilized with a boot if the fines were not paid immediately. Paul threw the letters away, still convinced that his Santa work justified bending parking rules. In late December, parking enforcement officers located Paul's sleigh van, parked illegally in a hospital fire lane. They checked the vehicle registration and discovered the massive amount of unpaid violations. Following standard procedures, They attached a bright yellow boot to the front wheel, preventing the van from being driven until all fines were paid. Paul emerged from the hospital in his full Santa costume, carrying props, and found his sleigh van immobilized by the boot. He became immediately angry and called the parking enforcement number, demanding they remove the boot. The operator explained that the boot would only be removed after full payment of all outstanding fines, totaling over $4,000. Paul argued that he was Santa Claus doing charity work and that the city was being heartless by preventing him from visiting sick children. The operator remained professional but firm, explaining that parking laws apply equally to everyone, and that Paul had received numerous warnings that he chose to ignore. Paul attempted to remove the boot himself by kicking it and trying to pry it off with tools from his van. Security cameras captured Paul in his Santa suit attacking the boot. Parking enforcement officers called the Los Angeles Police Department, reporting that the registered owner was attempting to tamper with a legally placed parking boot. Police arrived and found Paul still trying to remove the boot while wearing his Santa costume. Officers explained that tampering with a boot is a criminal offense and that Paul needed to stop immediately. Paul continued arguing that he should not have to pay the tickets because he was doing good work. The officers ran Paul's information and discovered he had outstanding warrants for failure to appear in court regarding the unpaid parking violations. Paul was informed that he was under arrest for the warrants and for attempting to tamper with the parking enforcement boot. Paul was handcuffed, still wearing his full Santa costume, and placed in the back of the police car. The sleigh van remained booted and parked illegally in the fire lane. Paul spent Christmas Eve in jail because he could not immediately post bail. The irony of Santa spending Christmas in jail was not lost on the officers processing his arrest. The criminal case included charges for the parking boot tampering, plus the accumulated parking violations. Paul eventually paid over $6,000 total, including the original fines, late fees, court costs, and penalties for tampering with the boot. His van was impounded, and he had to pay additional fees to recover it. The hospitals and nursing homes Paul had been visiting learned about his arrest and parking violations. Some facilities banned him from future visits, citing concerns about his judgment and willingness to break rules. Paul's reputation as a charitable Santa was damaged by his stubborn refusal to follow basic parking laws. Paul tried to generate sympathy by telling media that he was arrested for being Santa and helping sick children. But local news investigations revealed the full story of extensive parking violations and willful refusal to pay tickets, despite multiple warnings. Public opinion was not sympathetic to Paul's claims of victimhood. The Santa parking arrest taught Paul expensive lessons about civic responsibility and that good intentions do not excuse breaking laws repeatedly. Cities use parking regulations to ensure public safety, especially around hospitals, where fire lanes and emergency access must remain clear. Paul's arrogance in assuming he was above these rules because of his Santa activities cost him thousands of dollars and damaged his charitable work. The incident became a training example for parking enforcement about how to handle violators who claim special status or charitable purpose. The lesson was that while officers can use discretion for first-time violations, repeated offenses require standard enforcement regardless of who the violator claims to be or what they claim to be doing.